Okay, so here's the thing. There's a Japanese manga that's been running since 1968, holds the Guinness World Record for the longest serialized comic, and its author Takao Saito literally hired teams of researchers to make each plot historically accurate. Golgo 13 isn't just a hitman story, it's a 57-year archive of real-world conspiracy turned into pulp fiction. And what makes this series structurally fascinating, and I want to walk through this carefully, is that Saito didn't invent events wholesale. He remixed front-page history into something people could read in a coffee shop. Today I'm ranking the 10 most documented real events that Saito and his collaborators turned into Golgo episodes. Number 1 is going to surprise you, not because it's obscure, but because of how much of the story is literally verifiable history. Number 10. The Orbital hit, based on the Apollo-Soyuz test project, 1975. So in real history, July 17, 1975 was the moment the Cold War paused, just for a bit, when an American Apollo capsule and a Soviet Soyuz spacecraft physically docked in orbit. Thomas Stafford and Alexei Leonov actually shook hands in space, which at the time felt almost cosmically absurd. Saito's version in Biz Volume 4? Golgo is somehow on board, operating at 140 miles above Earth, and receives a sniper contract during the mission. Structurally, what Saito is doing here is taking détente, the actual diplomatic thawing between superpowers, and asking, what would it take to blow that up? Literally. It's unhinged, and I love it. Not an episode people talk about much, which is why it's number 10. Number 9. The Wraith of Paris is based on the death of Princess Diana, 1997. The real event needs no summary. August 31, 1997, Pont de l'Alma tunnel in Paris, Mercedes crash, Dodi Fayed and driver Henri Paul died alongside Diana. The conspiracy theories started almost immediately. Saito, writing the same year, didn't waste time. In Viz Volume 4, the story sets Golgo on a parallel contract inside the same tunnel on the same night, and he encounters a second team of assassins. He doesn't cause the crash, but the implication hangs there. What the author is doing here is threading the manga directly into collective grief and redirecting it into a thriller frame. It's ethically complicated. I've thought about that a lot, honestly. This is one of those episodes where you understand the craft and still feel slightly uncomfortable. Which probably means it worked. Number 8. The Spratly Islands story from Biz Volume 3. The real dispute is still ongoing right now. 6 nations claim the Spratly Islands in the South China Sea: China, Vietnam, the Philippines, Taiwan, Malaysia, and Brunei. The islands sit over what's estimated to be Kuwait-level oil reserves, which explains why nobody is backing down. Saito's angle in the manga is characteristically deadpan. Golgo lands on a coral reef claimed by all 6 parties simultaneously, completes his contract, and leaves. No one flag wins. There's something almost satirical in that. If you think about it, this is a geopolitical joke with a 308 Winchester punchline. The arc captures the absurdity of territorial disputes in a way that a policy paper never could, and frankly, the situation has barely changed since Saito drew it. Number 7. Hydra, based on the Tiananmen Square massacre, June 4, 1989. This is one of the most significant political events of the 20th century. The Chinese People's Liberation Army opened fire on student pro-democracy protesters in Beijing, with death toll estimates ranging from hundreds to several thousand. Saito placed Golgo inside the crowd on the day of the crackdown, not as a political actor, but running a separate contract. He takes out one person hours before the tanks arrive. It's a strange narrative choice. The most brutal state violence of the decade is treated as backdrop for a private business transaction. I wrote a paper in grad school about how thriller fiction neutralizes political trauma by making it scenery, and this episode is maybe the cleanest example I've ever found. It's uncomfortable in a different way than the Diana episode. More clinical. Number 6. The JFK assassination, and specifically how Golgo 13 handled it in the 1983 anime film, The Professional. The real history, November 22, 1963, Dallas, Lee Harvey Oswald was the officially designated lone gunman per the Warren Commission. The conspiracy theories, of course, have never stopped. The professional leans directly into that space. In Saito's version, the FBI commissioned the assassination through a figure named Leonard Dawson. The film was controversial, though, and this is interesting, the English language release edited the JFK framing considerably. What the author is doing in the original is essentially mainstreaming conspiracy structure, treating the grassy knoll hypothesis as action manga premise. Saito said in interviews he did extensive research. Whether you agree with his editorial choices here or not, the craft is undeniable. Number 5. The Gun at AM Shara, based on Project Babylon and the assassination of Gerald Bull. And this is where it gets interesting, because the real story is already more unhinged than fiction. Gerald Bull was a Canadian astrophysicist who genuinely wanted to launch satellites using artillery. Saddam Hussein hired him in 1988 to build Project Babylon, a supergun with a 350mm bore, a 30-meter barrel, and a range of roughly 1,000 kilometers. Bull was shot 5 times outside his Brussels apartment in March 1990. Mossad is the most common theory. No one was ever charged. The UN destroyed the remaining supergun components after the Gulf War. Saito's version has Golgo tasked with destroying the supergun before it can be aimed at the White House. The real story needed almost no dramatization, and that's exactly why it lands so hard. Number 4. The Pope John Paul II Freemason Arc. The real event, May 13, 1981. Mehmet Ali Agca, a Turkish ultranationalist, shot Pope John Paul II 4 times in St. Peter's Square. The Pope survived. The background to the assassination attempt included a tangled web of allegations: Bulgarian intelligence, Soviet KGB involvement, and yes, Vatican political factions. Saito's version reframes this beautifully. A Freemason faction hires Golgo to take down the people who organized an abduction of the Pope. Golgo initially refuses, retrieval isn't his job. The client revises the contract, the kidnappers need to die, and so does whoever's holding the Pope. He accepts. Structurally, it's Saito's most elegant commission structure. The refusal and renegotiation makes Golgo feel like a very specific kind of professional. Which he absolutely is. Number 3. And this is one I find genuinely fascinating from a publishing history standpoint, the Vatican money laundering episode from 1988. Roberto Calvi was the chairman of Banco Ambrosiano, sometimes called God's banker because of the Vatican's investment relationship with the bank. In June 1982, his body was found hanging beneath Blackfriars Bridge in London. The Vatican Bank, the IOR, was implicated in a money laundering operation running into hundreds of millions of dollars. Mafia connections. Freemason connections. It sounds like Saito invented it. He didn't. When Saito ran a Golgo episode touching the Vatican's banking network in 1988, he received enough external pressure that the episode was pulled from all reprints. Wikipedia confirms 3 Golgo episodes were deemed offensive or libelous and never recollected. This is one of them. The episode's uncollected status is itself a historical document. Number 2. The Iran hostage crisis arc, and again, this is an episode that was pulled. November 4, 1979, following the Iranian Revolution, student militants stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. Operation Eagle Claw, Carter's military rescue attempt in April 1980, failed catastrophically in the Iranian desert. Reagan's inauguration day, January 20, 1981, is when Iran released the hostages, and the timing has never stopped being debated. When Saito ran a Golgo episode engaging with the Iran embassy situation in 1986, it drew protest from the Iranian government through diplomatic channels, and it was pulled. What I keep coming back to is this: the fact that governments cared enough to complain tells you something about how seriously Saito was being taken as a political commentator. These weren't frivolous objections. They treated the manga as if it mattered. Because it did. And number 1. Power to the People, this Volume 3 title story, based on Nelson Mandela's presidential inauguration in May 1994. The real history: Mandela spent 27 years in Robben Island prison before being released in 1990. 4 years later, He became South Africa's first black president, marking the end of apartheid. The 1995 Rugby World Cup, wait, that's adjacent, where was I? Right, the inauguration, May 10, 1994. Saito's version is the one episode in this list where Golgo acts as something close to a historical corrective. White Afrikaner extremists hired Golgo to eliminate government officials who could destabilize Mandela's new administration. The flashback, a young Mandela in Robben Island teaching Golgo escape techniques, is fiction, but it's fiction that treats Mandela as an agent rather than a symbol. And given when this was written, 1994, that distinction matters a lot. It's the episode where Saito most clearly had a point of view about which side of history he was on. So that's the top 10. What's wild to me is how Saito wasn't writing thrillers in a vacuum. He was processing the actual front page of the newspaper into something people could read in a coffee shop. And across 57 years, through assassinations and Cold War standoffs and financial scandals that governments tried to bury, Golgo kept showing up. That's not longevity, that's a method. Which one of these would you want to read first? Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious whether people go for the historical heavyweights like the Mandela or Tiananmen arcs, or the ones that got pulled. And subscribe, I do long-form deep dives like this every week.